Okay, hello. My name is Monique Bellitz. I moved 2 years ago to this old adobe house here in Lama. I'm very, very glad to be back. I went to grad school at UNM in Albuquerque, and I fell in love with the culture, the people, the landscape, the history, and everything together. And so after I went into early retirement, I couldn't get back here fast enough. So Lama has been very important for me in the expression of my work for the last 1.5 years. And so I have to build up a whole new body of work, and I want to share with you what I'm doing. I used to work in oil painting, so here I have an example there. I did printmaking, I did drawing, watercolor, nearly all techniques you can think of. And one thing that I have kept on doing for at least 10 years is a collage style that I use on top of cradle board. So this here is a cradle board. It has a wooden cradle, and then on top of it is a thin wooden board. And what I do is I create little landscapes, and I put a little figure in there. So the figure is cut out of paper like this. Is amate paper. It comes from Mexico. It comes in the colors brown or beige, and it has already suggestions of women in there. So I get guided by the shapes that I find in here, and then I create a little person. As you see, here is one, and it's standing at the edge of a huge open landscape, the ones that you find here in New Mexico. And then I use a watercolor, for example, that I made 3 years ago, and I tear it up and glue it down. And underneath here, this little strip is from a woodcut that I did about 10 years ago. And I have wonderful papers, all kinds of cream and gray and tan, kind of wonderful to represent the desert. And then I make my marks on it, the marks for grass, the marks for sagebrush, for all kinds of things that I see around me. And I put it together to create a feeling or an insight that I have at the time. And of course, now we are all anxious about COVID-19, and so I made this piece with the thought that you can look into this wide landscape and there is no place to hide from the virus. I sometimes put in text. So here you can see this is another COVID piece. You see the mountain, and there is a text in it, and I take it out of this book. And it is a way for me to put my own history in my pieces. I was born in the Netherlands, and I grew up in Germany, and I speak 3 languages. Anyway, my dad used this book in high school in the Netherlands in the 1930s. So when I then use his school books, I create a connection to where I come from, and I put it into our times with its particular problems. Some people think it's crazy the way I work, because I take pieces that could be, they could stand on their own. Let me see whether I find something. Well, they're all already torn up. Oh, actually I can use this here. Where is it? So I made a small landscape mural on paper, for example, and it goes on and on. It's about Lake McConaughey in Nebraska. And what I do then, I tear it apart. I have no problems with it. So I tear it along here. So a piece like that, for example, and then I cut it off here, and then I add other elements to it. So this is blue too, we don't want that. Here are trees that could create a contrast, and that way I kind of create a new reality out of elements that I find here on my very messy desk. I have papers that suggest grasses, so I like to glue those in between, for example. And then when I'm done with the main idea, I draw just some marks all by themselves. And then, as you can see here, I've torn them off and I use them to fit in empty spaces. So this particular motif you find here in the foreground where the figure stands. And in my big mess, you see I have all kinds of papers, handmade papers, machine-made papers, papers that I printed on, that I drew on. This is a drawing from 1984, for example, that I'm reusing in a new way. This here is a decorative piece of paper that I use as well, and on and on. So the more messy my workplace is, the more it inspires me, actually. So I see this little piece of pebble paper. It could be a cloud, it could be a beach, you know, it gives me ideas. And then when I see combinations here on my desk, then I say, oh, these colors here, they work very nicely together. I'm going to put them into a piece. So this cradled collage work is just one well, what do you say? One branch of what I'm doing. They very often deal with my emotions that I put in there. So here is another one about COVID. Parents all alone with their kids and grandma cannot come and visit them, so they have to use technology. But I have another branch as well. Actually, two more branches. So when I came here, I needed to understand the landscape around me, and so I made pieces that really represent the landscape. I went out, I looked at it, I internalized it, and then I represented it as best as I could. I'm looking for an example in my mess. Okay, here is one. See what I find here. So again, I work on cradle boards, and here you see a landscape element that I found in El Rito. I think it goes the other way around. Oops! Like that. And you might notice that I have an affinity for patterns. So irregular patterns, but nevertheless I try to reduce landscape elements to dots, little stripes, little triangles, little dots. So I'm a dotty person, and I dot, you know, for the life of me. And this particular way, so using color and having actually a specific location in mind that I get from visiting the spot and memorizing it. I gave up on that recently, and I turned to pure pattern making to create in a more free way the landscape around me. And I did away with the color. I'm working on still a cradle board. It's just larger, and I cover it with acrylic paint. And I have a little bit of burnt sienna underneath, and then the rest is sort of black. And then I use acrylic ink, just a bottle of acrylic ink that I mix myself, and I use two tools. It is a nib for drawing, this one here, and then a tiny little brush for painting. So in a way, these pieces are hybrid pieces. They are drawn and painted at the same time. And I would like to show you how I do it. And it's very simple and very meditative, and that's why I love it so much. And me being me, I can do that in the big mess that I have left from my latest collage work. So maybe you have done calligraphy in your life. Maybe you have taken a basic design class that I taught for many years. Then you are familiar with the metal nib in a holder, and then you just start drawing. Well, come on. It was glued together. Yeah, so here I have little sagebrush is climbing up the hill. And it's actually my property that I'm drawing here. And I'm going to this particular place every day with my dog in the morning. And there is sagebrush, and there are grasses, and they are just dancing around. Everything in this landscape here moves, it sings. It brings you up and down and going around and over. So once I do these little marks, so this is Richard's little cabin where he lives, and here are my sagebrushes, spaced away from each other so they get enough water in the summer. And then the most fun I have is filling in the negative space with my tiny little baby brush. So I do that. There is a fence here. So I have no idea what I'm going to do when I start. I am making up a story and I spin it while I'm drawing it. It is, however, influenced from what I see or do or feel that particular day. So if I've seen bighorn sheep on the way to Red River, then I put, in the distance, I put a herd of bighorn sheep in there. If I just walk to the pond, then I've seen some details and I put those in there. And so, just like this, drawing, painting, and if things go wrong, which of course it happens, then I go over it with a black ink. And, nobody will notice, but only I will know. Anyway, so I start at the bottom. Here you see these kids sitting here. They're bummed out in my mind because Grandma is dying in the little casita here, of COVID, of course. I cannot get rid of COVID. This is my own house, and we have these wonderful trees here. So I just want to draw trees all day long. And that particular week, our apple tree started blooming, so I had to find a new pattern for my blooming apple trees, and here they are. And here it goes up to the pond, and you see that I'm not finished yet. So I will happily finish it, and then in the background will be our deer mountain called Flag Mountain. And so this is a testimony to my life and my feelings and my love for patterns.